Well, hello and welcome to PM Express. And this month is Domestic Violence Awareness Month. It's one area that we haven't paid attention to, but it's literally like a living dead. And once you haven't been there, you don't know what we are talking about. It makes one suicidal. It's like being sentenced to death and waiting forever for it to happen, where one spouse, either physical or emotionally, tries to overpower the other spouse. And in such circumstances, it's not easy to just break away to say I'm walking away or I'm leaving. How do you deal with it? And as I'm talking, there are many hundreds of us living in homes where the other spouse is being excessively abusive, emotionally abusive. And what do you do when you're caught up in a situation like that? And that's the discussion that we're going to have this evening. We'll also open the phone lines so that if there's anyone out there who is suffering some sort of an abuse, you can ring in, and I guess on today would, probably help you find out what the best solution is, because it can literally drive you mad. Can literally drive you mad. Just not the physical, but also the emotional. So we're looking at domestic violence and how it is we can solve it. My name is Anan Sakwal IV, Chief of the Little Republic of Akomodu Masan. When I come back, we're looking at domestic violence. Well, thank you very much for staying. And as I said, we're looking at domestic violence, emotional and physical. And with me in the studio to make it real and practical is Adolf Ewukubekun, who is a clinical psychologist. Who else is better placed to speak to the subject? Adolf, thank you and welcome.
Thank you for having me, Nana. I'm most grateful.
Adolf, you see, sometimes we think that these issues are a Western problem, and we blacks are copying it black because, as a black person, you can be like particularly emotional. Say, oh, I'm being emotionally abused. Maybe from childhood, it's all abusive words till you grow up. So if the whites are also complaining that, well, I'm being emotionally abused, then we also jump in and say we're being emotionally abused. How real is it?
Well, very real. And if you go to the Domestic Violence and Victim Support Unit of the Ghana Police Service, they will tell you that the numbers they are recording for domestic violence generally, physical, sexual, economic, are high. In other words, this is violence brewed in our own African port, in our own Ghanaian port, not imported from anywhere. And so it is real. Yes, we have been emotionally abused, but there is, our forebears said that where they rested, we shouldn't rest there anymore. If they knew, if they had foreknowledge, they were very smart people. That is why they survived. If they knew what we know now, they would have put an end to the violence that they perpetrated, because there was every need for them to survive. Okay? And they tried as much as they could. But now knowledge abounds. What they didn't know, we know. Yet, we hold on to certain ideas as if it's a fact of life. No. Emotional abuse, physical abuse is real. It is undermining the dignity of people who are going through. And that is the bottom line. Humanity is humanity, whether you are in Azerbaijan or Cape Town, or you are from a Kropong, you are a human being. And whatever indignity that is perpetrated at you is wrong. And that is the motivation for the fight against domestic violence.
You see, since you're a psychologist, I think that you could. Is it not the same westernization that is brewing this, most of this abuse. And I say this because, once upon a time, Mrs. Bequin probably won't be called Mrs. Bequin. Mrs. Bequin will not be called Mrs. Bequin. She would have her own name, even though she's, Uraire, and have her own name. And, she wouldn't be a housewife. She would, be engaged in whatever trade that you were in. It's when we became so-called modernized that, well, now we drop our names and you go to my church, I go to your church, and then housewife, brood, and then all this violence. I mean, has it been a factor of some of these abuses? Because culturally, one of the things that was automatic divorce was physical abuse. Mm-hmm. If you're going to get married culturally, one of the things that was instant divorce was if you hit the woman, or if the woman was going to hit you, that's it. Well, they give you if you're going to accept or not. But it was the grounds for divorce. So am I saying that, is this our quest to become westernized and having housewives and that's brewing all these abuses?
Well, the phenomenon of housewife hasn't been part of us. It's just a colonial relic. Mm-hmm. Our women, our mothers have always been out. Mm-hmm. So it is just, yes, housewife is a westernized concept. Mm-hmm. The British aristocrat who came and needed women to their wives to just serve them at home, organize parties and all that. But our women have always been out, making a living. Mm-hmm. All right. Mm-hmm. And they've not had a say in the public space. Though they rake in all the resources to care for the home, basically, they have no political rights even in the home. Major decisions are made by the men because we live in the man's world. Patriarchy reigns. And so in spite of all the hard work that they do, when it comes to the political decisions, major decisions, they are not allowed. And we have gender role differentiation, gender roles, that it is known that a woman has to do this, a man has to do this. That is how it has been partitioned culturally, such that even there are certain spaces women were not allowed and are still not allowed, shamefully, I might say. Mm. So when a woman who wants to break that cycle, break away from that restriction, a woman who wants to break away from that restriction is held in check by the use of violence. You have to be in your position. You don't have to behave like a man, okay? And there are names, Alomo Jata, Obabema, and all that, telling you that, no, this is not welcome. But we know there are dire consequences for these behaviors, because how can one person run the home? Why wouldn't another human being be given the opportunity to express her God-given talent? So you are right to say that culturally violence has been reprehensible. So it is even a wonder why people would use culture to justify the perpetration of violence. I think people who don't know their culture will want to justify, violence as being culturally valid. It isn't. And if traditionally we used to address violence seriously, why have we stopped? Why do we have some chiefs, unfortunately, endorsing the settlement of defilement and other things in their courts? It is unacceptable. It is against the law. And the last people who should, support that will be traditional, authorities who have jurisdiction for protecting their people. Okay, so no matter how you look at it, it is unacceptable. It kills, it hurts, it undermines human dignity, and also in terms of economic well-being. When you don't allow a woman to be herself, to pursue her dreams, you limit what can come into the family kitty. And it doesn't augur well for children. It doesn't augur well for you, the man yourself. It doesn't augur well for you.
Let me move it forward. In my intro, I was saying that being in an abusive relationship is like being sentenced to death and you never being killed. You know, you're just there, the rope dangling, but you're never, you know, asked to jump on it just to be done with it. It could be very, very excruciating because there could be children involved. The marriage could have been together for some time. Families are involved. You can't go, you can't stay. I mean, so what's the help? What do you do?
Yes, it is interesting. That is why women, the question we normally ask is, why do women stay in abusive relationship? And the reasons you have adduced, simply why they stay. Nowhere to go, nobody will believe them. They are economically disempowered. In some instances, the options are limited. And it could be that genuinely they love their spouse, they love their spouses because they are not always violent. There are moments where they really show you the TLC, and you really now come to terms with the man you really love. So there is you live in a certain ambiguity. Should I leave? Should I stay? And where you decide to stay, leave, you don't know where to go. Now, it is the where to go that is the problem for most women. Nowhere to go in the family home, nowhere to go in the public, sphere. Okay, so what we are encouraging, what we've been doing is to say that, well, domestic violence is a real canker. We need to be serious about it. The state needs to be serious about it. That led to the campaign to get a legislation to regulate that area. So now we have a Domestic Violence Act, we have a regulation, but there are real gaps in terms of service provision. And so though we are encouraging women to go to the state agencies, to the police, to the hospitals to report, they get there and the services they need is in short supply. They don't get it. So there's a double jeopardy. Okay, they are abused twice. What we call systemic trauma. They suffer it because from home they've been abused. They come to the state responding agencies and they don't get the services they require. All right, and it is only external intervention sometimes that will stop, will break the cycle of abuse. And that is why services are real. The state being serious about responding to abuse is very, very critical.
I was going to chip this in the last end, but let me bring it in because I know you're part of the ARC Foundation, which was a shelter for battered women. Now, how useful is a shelter like that? Is it a respite for you to move on or a respite for you to come back home?
Both. When there is fire at home, you need a place to go and cool off, for the fire to be doused, and for maintenance, whatever, to be fixed before coming back home. There may be instances where you cannot come back home. You've decided to move on. In both scenarios, the shelter provides safe space for you to really look at your life and put your life back on track. Whether you come back home where you left in the first instance or you move on, your well-being is guaranteed. You become a better person working through the shelter. Unfortunately, as I said, the ARC Foundation shelter has been in existence for 17 years. Wow. For 17 years, the only shelter in Ghana, the whole of Ghana, for abused women and their children. Wow. The state doesn't have a shelter. As we speak, how many years after independence?
Yeah. Is it that the state does not recognize the dangers or the troubles within that sector, or the usual, we have no funds?
Well, we have. I don't want to say we don't have funds, but is it a priority? Because yes, we don't have funds, but funds get, dispersed into other sectors. So if the sector is of priority to government, certainly it will get its fair share.
So within the whole Ghana, the state hasn't got a shelter.
The state hasn't got a shelter for abused women and their children.
Wow.
And the Ark Foundation shelter was a stopgap for the whole of Ghana. Survivors were referred from across the country to the shelter. And many lives have been rebuilt because the shelter gave them a second chance. As we speak, it has been closed down for the last 2 to 3 years.
Well, that's sad to hear.
Seriously pathetic. Seriously pathetic.
You see, apart from the state, do we as a people also recognize the agency or the need for a shelter? Because maybe the state is a reflection of us. Because we in turn become ministers and think, well,
Absolutely. I mean, yes, they mirror us because it is our aspirations that they would have to pursue. So, I mean, if the demands we place on our duty bearers are not so crucial, then they will do what they will do. They will think for us and implement their thoughts for us, and it may not be in our best interest.
I mean, what would classify an abusive relationship? Because in this day and age now, even if you compliment somebody, oh, I love your skirt, well, that's sexual abuse. Oh, your hair looks nice, that's sexual abuse. Everything is now sexual abuse. I mean, so within a relationship, I mean, at which point does one person walk to either you or the state to say, look, I am in an abusive relationship?
Well, I don't think it is as you are putting it, that everything has become sexual abuse. When we go that tangent, it's as if we're trying to minimize the experiences of those who are really, really suffering. And so when they come out to say we are suffering, we say, oh, one of those things. The Me Too movement has shown us that, well, it is true. Some have issues with the Me Too movement, but we know that it is not easy for a woman to come out to say that I have been abused. And he who feels it knows it. When your behavior is deemed unwelcome, it is unwelcome. If you are complimenting a woman and the woman says, hey, hold on, I don't like your compliment, don't come out to say as if you have a sense of entitlement. So, I mean, begin to rain more insult and all that. If it is unwelcome and you persist, it is abuse. Okay, so when you know you have been abused, oftentimes you look at the physical abuse. You are hurt, you are injured, you go to the hospital, and then you go to the police station, you are locked out for your room, you can't enter your house, then you need a shelter, and the state would have to provide you some avenue. But that is just what we see. But there are people whose home have become more than Afghanistan, have become more than Syria. The turmoil, the turbulence, the pain in the house is not easy. They too need a safe space to cool off, to put their life back on track. And that is where shelters become extremely important.
When it's not physical and it's emotional, I mean, do you still need a shelter, or the shelter is just for physical?
The shelter is for anyone who doesn't have a place to put her head as a result of abuse, be it emotional, social. There you have to. There is a need assessment, to really determine whether you need shelter, and when you need shelter, then shelter is provided for you. But as we speak, all those survivors who are in need of shelter cannot get them. Cannot get them.
The argument that, look, you're better off being in a physically abused relationship than an emotional abuse one, because emotional one can drag on for 12 months continuous, killing you. Whereas physical, maybe, he hit you in February and somewhere in October he hit you again, but the emotional one could just, go on and on and on and on. You being a psychologist, maybe difficult to say this is bad or this is worse, but if you were going to place somebody in the home, I mean, who gets the place in the home? The physically abused one or the emotionally tortured one?
Well, that is why I'm saying that there will be a thorough need assessment. And whoever qualifies by the indicators we use will be given a shelter if it is available. As we speak, it is not available. So you have to find your own levels. And I think it doesn't speak well for us as a nation.
But that's this. When the shelter was running, did the state, because I know the state was recommending...
referring from the police.
Yeah.
No support from the state.
But they refer to it?
Yes. No support.
Wow. Is it going to open anytime soon?
Well, that is why there is the Ark Shelter campaign. Some women have come together to say that no, as Ghanaians, they wouldn't look on for the shelter to go bust. And that it is not very good that as a country we don't have shelters for abused women and their children. So they have put this campaign together. The campaign is the Ark Shelter campaign, but it's not being waged by the Ark Foundation. Hedge Ghana, led by Ethiopia, and then her friends have come together to raise funds to open the shelter for 1 year. In January, they are hoping to get many people donate to the shelter campaign.
Wow.
So that they will be able to reopen it come January 2019. And so we are appealing to all public-spirited Ghanaians to cooperate everyone to help to donate to the shelter. If you go to the website, every detail you need to be able to donate is there.
Well, you see, it's one of those things where those who can help are those who probably don't go through any sort of abuse. Because by the time you're getting through abuse, you're so helpless, you are the one who needs the shelter. So is it a case where it's your young who it's your DM, so I mean, why do I go and help? I mean, I don't beat my wife or abuse my wife, so somebody needs a shelter, they go and deal with it. Is that case where we haven't created the awareness for those who are not being abused, but appreciate what those who are abused go through so that we help? Could that be the case?
Yeah, we have created some level of awareness. But in terms of volunteerism, the giving attitude for us to be kind to our neighbors, to love your neighbor as thyself, to go all out to say we want to put our money where our mouth is. Your mouth is not only your mouth. Okay? The issues you talk about, the issues you come on radio, you come on telly to be so angry about, have you practically done something about resolving them? Yes, the state must do it. And if we wait for the state, they will do what they can do. We have a litany of problems. What can we do as a people to help those of our kith and kin who are in crisis?
But could it also be that because we have been a very, social people where there's aunties, grandparents, there's the, hometown to fall back on, maybe that's why there isn't much of, shelters? Because there may be quite a number of people who, if you went in a marriage and there was a problem, look, and if your parents had that or you've gone into a shelter, they were thinking, what the hell are you doing in a shelter? But that could be the reason why maybe we don't have shelters.
Yeah, it's that social security we had in the extended family system. Nana, I think increasingly is becoming a myth because of urbanization. All right, your mother that you used to fall on, your aunties that you used to fall on, are all in the cities making a living. So who do you fall to? There are many people in the cities who cannot go back to their hometown because they are even homeless in their hometown when they go there because of serious poverty afflicting, So there are many people who are in need. They cannot go back to their hometowns because they have no place to put their head. They are in Accra and they are remitting back home. So when problem strikes in Accra, already the calls coming from your hometown, you are running away. Will you go back there? So there need to be some social intervention, some safety net for people who get into crisis.
Let me take a quick break and we are coming straight back. Well, he who feels it knows it, yeah?
Yes.
He who feels it knows it. We're talking about serious case of being abused, and once you've been abused, what do you do? The only shelter now is closed. In case somebody wanted to donate or do something, what do they do?
Well, you can contact the ACT Foundation on 0243 777773, and you can also donate via Kitwabiansa on mobile money, the same number. You can also donate all networks by dialing star 713 star 5517 star the amount and then hash to all networks. You can do that. Via the internet too, you can go to Global Giving, and the guidelines to donate is there on the Global Giving website. When you go to the ActShelterCampaign.org, ActShelterCampaign.org, you would have all this platform listed. Global Giving, GoFundMe, and you can also donate into the campaign's accounts, which is EcoBank account number 0533214454860301, which is the branch's reinsurance house, EcoBank Reinsurance House, account number 0533214454860301.
Well, let's see. I mean, every Sunday we are in church, every Friday we are in mosque. So let's see if we can reopen this to make sure that our church going and mosque going is actually true and not just physical. But has the gender ministry come up to say, look, how can we help?
Not yet. Not yet. We would want the gender ministry to take leadership, because if you look at the regulations, they are supposed to set up the management. There is a domestic violence management board, and the regulation we have is says that, and even the act says that there should be shelters. As we speak, the ministry hasn't led any intervention to set up these shelters. Some years ago, there was an attempt to do that, but it hasn't come to fruition. So we want the ministry to show leadership first by setting up the state shelters, because the need is huge across the length and breadth of this country.
So without the shelter, I mean, maybe somebody listening, what advice do you give to somebody in an abusive relationship today?
Well, there is still help. When you contact the ACT Foundation, when you go to the police station, the DOFSU, they will help you. Because you may not be able to move out, or you wouldn't want to move out. but you can stay safe.
Is it not going to make your matter worse?
Well, depending on your understanding of your risk levels, because normally what we do is that we do lethality assessment, how dangerous the environment is for you, and then we take you through safety planning so that you can stay in your own home if you have to. The best is to get out, but if you decide you want to stay in, then we will suggest some options for you to remain safe in your own home.
Has it got any bearing on the children, or this is a...
Absolutely. Just even witnessing abuse alone has dire consequences on children. Children not being abused, but they just being witnesses has serious issues for their well-being. And we know that adverse childhood experiences have serious implications for future mental health of women in particular. So we need to be very, very proactive about responding to issues of sexual and gender-based violence. And the shelter is critical. You know, there are very wonderful stories that we can tell about the Ark shelter. Families that have been ruined coming into the shelter and rebuilding their life. One of our success stories has been a young lady, a child, who was molested by the father, abandoned. The family rejected her. She walked into the shelter for years. Now ask me where she is. Through the effort of the shelter, the Ark Foundation, she is now a trained teacher. Now a trained teacher, helping rebuild Ghana. If there was no shelter for this child, where would her story, what would he have told about her story? It would have been a different story altogether. There are countless number of, and it's not only Ghanaians who benefit from the shelters. So we will also urge the foreign nations to visit the website, the ArkShelterCampaign.org, because we have had foreign nationals married to Ghanaians who go through serious abuse accessing the shelter. They and their children.
See, I'm wondering how, you say the shelter is closed. If this is the only shelter, and you look at how wide range the countries and all the support systems, all the corporate bodies and everything, to stifle the shelter of resources to the point that it closes is an indictment on all of us.
Absolutely, absolutely. And sometimes it's painful, you know, when you know what little resources are needed to turn around the fortunes of another human being. Not so much.
So, I mean, at the moment, when we say the shelter is closed down, is it closed down, structure is dilapidated, or food to feed the woman coming in, or the electricity bill, or what's...
There are costs in terms of maintaining the shelter. The shelter is there. Of course, we need to refurbish the shelter, but everything in terms of structural, it is there. But we need the services. We need medical support. We need psychological support. We need to feed them. We need security, safety. So all these costs must be catered for. And that is why the campaign is on. And when you go to the website, you will know what your money will be used for. To send children to the occupants to the hospital, to even resettle them.
What is it like? The last victim turn up at the gate and you say, I'm sorry, you have to go back to your abuse home because we are no more taking anybody.
You don't want to go through that experience. Nana, you wouldn't want to go through that experience. But we have had to stop DOFSU from referring clients to the shelter because it couldn't be run. It had to be closed down. And the reason it was closed down not because of lack of expertise, but lack of funding to run the shelters. All social workers had to go home because they couldn't be paid.
And the woman, is it free if you?
Absolutely free. Absolutely free. We had support from donors who had to pull out. And our own system couldn't support it. So now we are reaching out to every Ghanaian, everywhere, to go to the website and donate.
Okay, if you put the mobile number out again, or the telephone number out again before the end.
All right. The number is 024 377 7773. The sevens are 5. 0243 77 7773. You can send mobile money.
And
you can call
to inquire.
You can call to inquire.
Okay.
Those who are on the net who want to pay by credit card and other things can go to Global Giving. They are hosting the campaign. You can go to GoFundMe. They are also hosting the campaign.
Oh, we say thank you very much to Angela Jabnamwaji, who started the shelter.
But the campaign is being waged by Efiapia, Akocha Dakwa, and their friends. And we are most grateful to them.
We're most grateful to all of you. And I think I particularly urge the mosques, the churches, and corporate Ghana to take lead. And then all of us, Kakrebians, should also chip in. I'm sure we should be able to at least have one shelter that will benefit that one woman going through an unfortunate situation of abuse.
And one child.
And one child. And one child. And one child. Who could be a teacher. You know, teaching and serving Mother Ghana. But Adolf, thank you very much for coming in.
Thank you for having me.
To you at home, thank you very much for watching. As I always say, we'll be back to do this all over again. So have a good weekend.